For decades, we've all kind of lived with this idea that the world, despite its chaos, runs on a set of rules. You've got agreements, international law, a certain predictability. But what happens when the biggest player on the field just decides, nah, not today? We're in the middle of a massive seismic shift, and today we're going to break down the new, unwritten rules of global power. Let's get right into it. And this quote from French President Emmanuel Macron, speaking at the World Economic Forum, man, it really gets to the heart of what's at stake here. It's a direct shot at a world he sees slipping away from cooperation and heading straight towards coercion, a world where it's not about what's right, but about who's strongest. So here's our game plan. First, we're going to look at the geopolitical crisis that has world leaders seriously on edge. Then, we'll dive into this really surprising economic theory that might actually explain some of the madness. We'll see how America's allies are being forced to react, what happens when a power vacuum opens up on the world stage, and we'll end on what might be the new frontline in all this, the battle to control the story itself.
All right, let's start where all the alarm bells started ringing, the big annual meeting of global leaders in Davos, Switzerland. And let me tell you, the mood there wasn't exactly optimistic. It felt like a direct challenge to the entire system that's been in place since World War II.
So get this, the spark for all this panic? The US threatening tariffs because it wanted to take over Greenland. Yeah, Greenland, an autonomous part of Denmark. Now, this wasn't seen as some quirky negotiation tactic. It was seen as a raw power play. Macron called it a world where the only law that seems to matter is that of the strongest. And it basically forced America's closest allies into a really tough spot. And Europe's reaction? Oh, it was fast. And the language they used? Wow. The head of the EU Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, flat out called the tariff threat a mistake you don't make between friends. Denmark's prime minister warned that, hey, the worst might not even be over. And President Macron, he didn't pull any punches, calling the whole thing crazy and threatening to use the EU's brand new trade bazooka against the US for the very first time. Okay, so it's really easy to look at all this and just see chaos, right? Just pure political muscle flexing, a complete breakdown of how things are supposed to work. But what if there's more to it? What if under all the noise, there's a cold, hard economic logic driving this? Let's explore that. This is really the key question we need to ask. Is this just a temper tantrum on the world stage, or is it actually a strategic economic maneuver that turns what we all thought was a weakness into a powerful weapon? This is where things get really interesting because it completely flips the script on what we've all been taught about economics. For years, the story has been that a big trade deficit, importing way more than you export, is a bad thing, a vulnerability. But a fascinating new economic paper argues the total opposite, that a huge deficit might actually give you the upper hand in a trade war. So how on earth does that work? Well, the logic, laid out by economists Pau Pujolas and Jack Rosbach, is actually pretty simple when you break it down. If you import a ton of stuff from another country, you can slap tariffs on all those goods and collect a massive amount of revenue. Meanwhile, because you don't export as much to them, they have way fewer of your products to hit back with their own tariffs. Their ability to retaliate is limited. The bigger your deficit, the more one side of the fight becomes, in your favor. And this quote from the researchers themselves really sums it up. They're saying a trade deficit isn't a weakness, it's leverage. It actually enhances your power to bend the terms of trade using tariffs. It's a wild theory, and it totally reframes this whole debate. So whether it's bullying or some kind of 4D chess, the result for America's allies is pretty much the same. They're looking at a new, unpredictable world, and they're having to adapt fast. Foreign policy expert Fareed Zakaria just nails it with this quote. The relationship isn't what it used to be. For allies, it's not just about partnership anymore. It's about risk management. And the main risk they're trying to manage? It's the United States itself. I mean, just look at Canada, America's closest neighbor, right? For decades, their whole economic strategy was simple: get closer to the US at every level. But now, their foreign minister is literally saying their new plan is massive diversification away from America. They're chasing new markets, even looking to China for investment. This isn't just some small change in policy, it's a huge historic pivot, and you're seeing it happen all over the world. And this kind of shift, it doesn't just happen in a bubble. It has these massive ripple effects across the globe. When the country that has basically set the world's agenda for almost a century suddenly takes a step back, it creates this huge vacuum. So you have to ask, who's going to step in? Zakaria drives this point home again, highlighting just how big of a deal this is. I mean, think about it. For generations, the big global conversations about trade, security, the climate, they were pretty much all started and framed by the US. That's just not the reality anymore.
So who's filling that void? Well, while the US is looking inward, the rest of the world isn't just sitting around waiting. The European Union is out there building bridges. They signed a huge free trade deal with South America's Mercosur bloc. They're pushing for new deals with India and Southeast Asia. The world is moving on and creating a new agenda without America at the head of the table. And Zachariah's final point here is a stark one. The biggest winner in all of this is China.
Okay, this brings us to what might be the most fascinating and honestly the most crucial part of this whole new world order. When the old rules start to crumble and raw power, like those tariff strategies we talked about, becomes a key tool, something else becomes incredibly important. If you can't rely on the law, you have to rely on influence. And that opens up a whole new battlefield, the fight to control the narrative. Now, this diagram, it might look a little intense, but what it's showing is something really powerful coming out of communications science. Basically, it's a model for understanding how you can strategically change the story of an event to change how the public reacts to it. This isn't just some fuzzy art form anymore. It's actually becoming a science. So, this key method is called counterfactual analysis. It's basically a fancy scientific way of playing what if. Like, what if a big negotiation is failing and everyone hates it? Well, what if we change the official tone from aggressive to cooperative? Or what if we swap out the lead negotiator for someone who's a little more popular? It's a systematic way to see how the framing of an event can be just as powerful as the event itself. And this table here, it's like the toolkit for this new kind of influence. These are the actual levers that diplomats and communicators can pull. You can change who's in the room, how transparent the process is, the tone of the press releases, the actual substance of the deal, or even something as simple as the city where the meeting is held. Each little tweak can have a real, measurable impact on how people feel. And does this stuff actually work? Oh, yeah. A recent study using this exact framework found a 70% success rate in taking negative public opinion about an event and shifting it to neutral or even positive. 70%. That is a huge number. It proves that if you scientifically adjust the narrative, you can literally engineer a better reaction from the public. Which leaves us with this final big question. As the old rules of power get torn up and rewritten, we've seen how brute force and economic leverage are making a comeback. But in this new era where perception can so easily become reality, maybe, just maybe, the ultimate weapon isn't an army or tariffs or an economy, but just the ability to tell the best story.